Chinese, it's just so easy. How do you win a war without fighting? By getting your adversary to kill himself. Well, how do you convince a strong, self-respecting, powerful country like ours that has ruled the world for 100 years to do that? Turns out it's pretty easy. You take a collection of dumb, desperate people in middle age, hoping to keep on to their stupid TV jobs. You add scripts and some hairspray, and they just repeat the lies for you.
Okay, so this clip from Tucker Carlson is obviously unhinged in like a million different ways, but like first and foremost, we need to acknowledge something. Diplomats from China have been very, very clear and consistent that China has been very directly and explicitly trying to avoid Cold War politics like at all costs, to the point where China has a bunch of trade partnerships around the world with countries that have radically different political systems and has a pretty strict policy of non-interventionism when it comes to internal politics, all in an effort to maintain this sort of anti-Cold War mentality where they reject the idea of some sort of Cold War between China and the United States. But all that aside, that's not going to stop Tucker Carlson and Republicans from broadly being racist. But as a quick random aside first, like Tucker Carlson referring to the United States as a self-respecting country has to be one of the funniest things I've ever heard, because literally the United States just spent a ridiculous amount of time interrogating whether or not TikTok is stealing people's data, when I know this is so wild, but every social media platform is collecting data. It's not just TikTok, and TikTok is literally just following the existing laws within the United States. Quite literally, they will say that, oh, TikTok in China is so different than TikTok in the United States. If kids watching TikTok in China just get nothing but educational content, and it's also wholesome. And it's like, yeah, maybe that's because China has pretty strict child protection laws for the internet. And so if the United States wanted the same data privacy laws and child protection laws for the internet that China has, all the United States would need to do is pass those laws here. It's not that TikTok is somehow magically, maliciously stealing data in a way that any other company in the United States is literally doing the same way. But this just speaks to like how silly Tucker Carlson is. And unfortunately, the reality is a lot of right-wingers will just eat this up. They are so ready and willing to believe this idea that China is like out to get the United States and really just wants nothing more than to just go to war or something like that, when the reality is the only people that are talking about war with China are politicians in the United States of America who are just angry and upset about one simple fact. China's trade partnerships around the world presents an alternative to the United States' trade partnerships, which is just a better deal. Interest rates from China are lower, and the loans that they offer just don't come with the same conditions that loans from the United States do. And as a result, many countries are choosing to work more and more with China for their trade partnership. It's really not that complicated. It's just that the United States is angry that it's more difficult to impose austerity measures, which is really what's fueling all this right-wing fear-mongering about China lately. It's not really about anything other than the simple fact that American companies are deeply upset that it's harder for the United States to compete in international markets. But the simple fact that Tucker Carlson is willing to go on these like ridiculous rants and invent these conspiracy theories about China trying to like propagandize the United States is just fundamentally at its core silly. But it speaks to the long-standing racism in the United States about painting China as some sort of like mysterious plotting country that's like out to get the United States. It literally goes all the way back to the Chinese Exclusion Act, where the United States always had this sort of like particular flavor of racism against not just Chinese people specifically, but Asian folks more broadly. And it's just really, really shameless that unfortunately a lot of Democrats are also eating this up as well. Because, like I said earlier, giant companies in the United States are upset about the fact that China has just literally made international markets more competitive. And so the Democratic Party, which works for these big business interests, is willing to sort of play along with these right-wing fear-mongering tactics in an effort to do things like banning TikTok. Then there's, of course, the layer of, when they're talking about banning TikTok, is just the simple fact that there are a lot of very big leftist voices on TikTok. It is a platform that, despite its flaws and despite the structural racism that exists both within algorithms and the way the United States responds to content more broadly, the reality is that TikTok is a place where left-wing content is sort of flourishing to a certain degree. And there's a lot of push for people to learn a bunch of new things that run directly contrary to the interests interests of capital in the United States. And that is something that both Democrats and Republicans are a little bit upset by, and especially media organizations that are willing to fearmonger about TikTok, because these media organizations don't do as well as these like individual TikTokers who just make this very unique content. And so these old school media institutions are struggling to get their foot in the door on TikTok, and they see competition with it. And so they're totally willing to play along with both the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of fear-mongering about a social media platform, which ultimately, once again, is doing the same thing that a lot of other platforms are doing.